Sponsored by Rabbi Shlomi and Mirla Greenwald. This is the Sicha from Likutei Sichos, Chelek Yud, Parshas Noach, Sicha Alef. And the topic of the Sicha is that in this week's Parsha we learn the pasuk of Tzoyar Ta'aseh Lateva and the teaching of Rashi in it. And there are 4 parts in the Sicha. The Rebbe will, number 1, ask 5 questions on Rashi. Number 2, present the key to answering the 5 questions. Number 3, answer the 5 questions. And number 4, present the Yenish al Torah in Rashi. On the pasuk of Tzoyar Ta'aseh Lateva, so Rashi quotes the word Tzoyar, and he explains, Yesh Eimrim, there are those who say Chalein, that Tzoyar is a Chalein, a window, V'yesh Eimrim, and there are those who say Even Tova, that Tzoyar is a precious stone, Hameir Lehem, that would shine for them, that would give them light. Now, simply, the intent of Rashi over here is to explain that the word Tsayar is related to the word Tzaharayim, which is light. And the meaning of the pasuk is that Hashem commanded Noach to do something that would bring light into the Teva. And Rashi gives 2 explanations for what this thing was. Yesh Eimrim Chalain. One opinion says that it is a window, that through the window light would come into the Teva. And that's why the window was called a tzoyar, because it was a source of tzoyar tzaharayim, light. And there are those who say that it was a precious stone. And what's the reason that it was called tzoyar, which is light? Because it was a precious stone, hameir lahem, that would give them light. And there are 5 questions here. The first question is, in the pasuk it's written tzoyar in the singular. Tzoyar ta'aseh lateva, make one tzoyar. And also Rashi explains it to mean either one window or one precious stone. And so the question is, how is there enough light from one window or one precious stone for the entire Teva, which was 300 amos long, 50 amos wide, and 30 amos tall? Building on the first question, this is especially difficult since the pasuk says kinim tas es hateva, and Rashi explains what are kinim medayrim l'chol behema v'chaya, that there were separate compartments for all of the animals, for each of the animals. And it says about the teva that it was built tachtim shnim ushlishim, that it had 3 floors. So even if we are doichik and say that Noach built a very large window for the Teva, how could one window light up all these separate compartments and separate floors? The third question is, it's known that Rashi gives 2 explanations about something if each of them on its own is not good enough to be able to resolve and explain all the details of the pasuk. And so therefore Rashi gives 2 explanations, because the first one's not enough and the second one's not enough. And it's such that the difficulties on the first explanation are not there on the second explanation, and the difficulties on the second explanation are not there on the first explanation. And that way, each of them, in a way, balances out the other one. And in addition, if Rashi gives 2 explanations, it's always that the first one is the better explanation, and that's why Rashi brings it first. So according to this, we have to understand what are the difficulties with each of these explanations, and also in what way is the first explanation better than the second explanation. The fourth question is, according to the rule that we just said, that when Rashi brings 2 explanations, it's because each of them has a difficulty that the other one doesn't have. So it's understood that when the 2 explanations that Rashi does bring have a difficulty, and there is a third explanation that will resolve that difficulty, then Rashi will also bring that third explanation, even if the third explanation has a difficulty, and even if it has an extremely great difficulty, which would be the reason to bring it third. But still he'll bring it because it answers the sheer difficulty of the first 2 explanations. So according to that, so the question over here is, since according to both of the explanations that Rashi brings, there is a difficulty, which, like we said, is how was one window or one precious stone enough to light up the whole Teva? So why doesn't Rashi bring down over here Like the Cheskuni says, that Tsayar means Yitzhar, meaning oil. And Tsayar Tasal Teva is the command of Hashem to Noach to bring oil into the Teva so that he could light many candles, which would light up the whole Teva. And even if you say that saying Tsayar means Yitzhar is very difficult, it doesn't really fit with the word. Tsayar and Yitzhar is not the same word. And also then there's another difficulty that it says Tsayar Tasel Teva. He didn't make it, he brought it in. So even though you have those difficulties, but on the other hand, it's specifically according to this explanation that it means oil, you're going to be able to answer the question that is on the both of the first two explanations. And so Rashi should have brought it at the very least as a third explanation. And the fifth question is, later Rashi explains on the pasuk Yoyim v'Layla lo yishbaisu. Rashi explains that mechlal, this implies sheshafsu kol yemei samabel, that they were shovis. Yom and Laila did stop all the days of the Mabul, shalei shimshu amazolis, because the mazolis were not operating, v'lei nikar ben yom v'Laila. And you could not recognize, you couldn't differentiate between night and day. And so now we have a tremendous difficulty. Like the Re'im asks, Mata eles chaloin hateva im loy hoya b'chol yoyim yimei amabel. What was the benefit? What was the purpose of having a window in the Teva if there was no light of the day throughout the whole time of the Mabul? What was the purpose of this window? Regarding the fifth question, we're going to support the question by negating two possible answers. So Mefarshe Rashi explained in order to answer this question that when it says Leishimshu Amazalis, it refers to the movement of the Galgalim. Only the movement stopped, but the Mazals themselves were still functioning, and so there was still some light in the world. However, we already explained a number of times that Rashi wrote his Pirush in a very clear way, in a way that also Ben Chomesh Lemikra won't make a mistake in what he means to say. And in our case, the simple meaning of the words of Rashi says, Michlal sheshafsu, that they stopped, Shaloi shimshu hamazalis, that they didn't function, they didn't serve. The simple meaning of those words is not that they did serve and they did fulfill their function of providing light, and it's just that the movement stopped. That's not the meaning. The meaning is that they completely stopped. Now, another thing is that another answer we're going to negate to support the question is that it would seem that you could say that Leishimshu Amazalis was only during the 40 days of the Mabul. Because Rashi says they weren't Leishimshu Amazalis during the Mabul. And the Pasuk says, Vayihi HaMabul Arbayim Yoim Ala Aretz. The Mabul is only 40 days. And so after the 40 days, the Mazalis again were functioning, and there would be a benefit in making a window for the Teva, and it would bring in light. But we still have the difficulty regarding the 40 days. What lit up the Teva during the 40 days of the Mabul? And so we have this fifth question as well. Now we're going to move on to present the key of the Sicha. And the key of the Sicha is a certain idea that based on this idea, we're going to answer all of the questions. And we're going to immediately lead into answering questions 1, 2, 4, and 5. So the explanation of all of this is as follows. When Hashem commanded Noach to make the Teva, so Hashem didn't tell him all the details about how to make it. For example, it says in the Pasuk, towards the end, that Vayasar Noach es michsa Teva, that Noach removed the covering of the Teva. And we don't find that Hashem commanded Noach to make a covering. So too, according to the explanation that Sayar is an Even Teva, we don't find that Hashem commanded Noach to make the window that is mentioned later on, that he used to send the birds out through. And so too, we don't find that Hashem commanded Noach to make an entrance for the Teva. And the reason is that we don't find these commands from Hashem. In Pshuta Shel Mikra, it's understood that when Hashem commanded Noach to make a Teva, he didn't have to command him about all the necessary parts related to its building, because they're self-understood. And Hashem only commanded him to do the things that Noach wouldn't know to do on his own. And therefore, Hashem didn't have to command him to make a covering. Obviously, he's not going to leave this Teva, this boat, uncovered when there's going to be a Mabul. And so to an entrance for the Teva. Obviously, you need an entrance, because it's obvious that they are among the main parts of the Teva. So this is an idea that we're being introduced to over here, that there are certain things in the Teva that were self-understood, and Noach did them on his own, and there was no need for a command from Hashem to Noach to do these things. And based on that, we're going to lead into answering questions 1, 2, 4, and 5. And then afterwards, we're going to answer also question number 3. And now, based on this, we could answer questions 1, 2, 4, and 5. According to this, it's also understood regarding having light in the Teva. Essentially, Noach didn't need a command from Hashem to arrange to have light in the Teva, because it's obvious that he would have to do that. Of course he needs lights, so he would do it on his own. And especially since every type of animal was in the Teva, and in separate compartments, and it was his responsibility to feed them. So of course, he needed to have light. And so it's certain that even without a command from Hashem, Noach prepared either candles, oil, etc., to light up the Teva. And this answers questions 1, 2, 4, and 5. Questions 1 and 2 were asking, how was there enough light from one window and one precious stone? And especially since there were many floors and different sections, the answer is that that is not what he used for light. Noach already arranged the light on his own. This is a separate command from Hashem. Then in addition to that, Hashem was telling him, Tsayar Tasel Teva. It also answers question number 4. Why not bring a third explanation that Tsayar means Yitzhar? That whole question was based on the premise that there's not enough light from the Chalein Echad or Even Teva Achas, from one window or one precious stone. And so why don't we say that it means that he brought enough light? Well, according to what we said now, he already brought enough light on his own without any commands from Hashem. And so there is enough light. The whole question is based on the premise that there's not enough light, so why not give this explanation? But there is enough light. And it also answers, how was this enough light from one window during the 40 days of Leishimshu Amazalis? Again, there was enough light since Noach already arranged to have light without any command from Hashem. And Tsayar Tasel Teva was a separate command that Hashem gave him after it was already in place that Noach arranged to bring in that there should be enough light in the Teva. Now we're going to move on to answering question number 3. However, according to this, the question arises, why did Hashem command Noach, Tsayar Tasel Teva, if Noach went on his own, already arranged to have light in the Teva? Why is he having this command? He's already going to do it on his own. Just like Hashem didn't command him to make a covering and an entrance because he would do it on his own. So why did Hashem command him? Tsayar Tasel Teva. He shouldn't have commanded him. And so we must say that there was a special command here to add more light to the light that Noach already prepared. And Rashi gives 2 explanations for what Tsayar means. Yesh Oimrim Chalain. There are those who say that it is a window, that through this window there would be extra light in the Teva after the 40 days of Leishimshu Amazalis. And even though one window doesn't add a lot of light, nevertheless, it also served other purposes, to bring things in and out, and for ear, etc. However, this explanation doesn't fit so well, because since the Torah uses the term tsayar and not chalain, so that indicates that the main purpose it served was for light, because tsayar is related to the word tzaharayim, so it used it for the light aspect of it, not for the chalain, which is to bring things in and out and for ear. And so if that's the case, so then there are 2 difficulties with this explanation. Number 1, one window can only light up a small part of the Teva, and number 2, it only helped after 40 days. And therefore Rashi brings another explanation. V'yesh Eimrim Even Teva HaMe'ir Lehem. There are those who say that it was a precious stone that gave them light, that according to this explanation, they can take the tzayhar, the precious stone, anywhere in the Teva and at all times. So here we see the weakness of the first explanation and how it is answered by the second explanation. The weakness of the first explanation is that it only provides a little bit of light to one area, and only after the 40 days. It didn't help during the 40 days. Whereas according to the second explanation, that it was a precious stone, so it could be brought to all parts of the Teva, and from the very beginning, from day 1 that they entered the Teva. However, according to this explanation, it doesn't fit into the words Tsayar Tasel Teva. It's not something that he made for the Teva, and it should have said something like Tsayar Tachnis La Teva, bring it into the Teva. And also, why would Hashem command Noach to do something so out of the ordinary? A window is something more ordinary to build into a Teva. But the precious stone is something very out of the ordinary. It's a very strange thing to prepare a precious stone to add light. And because this explanation doesn't fit in the words of the pasuk, that's a much greater difficulty. So therefore Rashi only presents it as the second explanation, and the first explanation is the main one. So that explains to us how each one of the answers, each one of the explanations of Rashi has a weakness that the other one doesn't have. And also it explains to us in what is the difficulty on the first explanation less. Why is it less than the difficulty on the second explanation? Because the difficulty on the second explanation is that it doesn't fit with the words of the pasuk. And also the actual command is a very strange thing to bring a precious stone into the teva. And therefore, Rashi brings the first explanation first. Here the Rebbe adds more to what he just said to explain why the first explanation is the first one in Rashi. And I didn't understand this part fully. We'll go through it and see what we can explain. And furthermore, we can explain why Rashi brings the first answer first by first prefacing. We spoke many times that Rashi answers everything that is difficult in Pshuta Shemikra. And in our discussion, there seems to be a great difficulty that Rashi doesn't answer. And that is, by all the details of the commands given regarding making the teva, Rashi explains the reason for the command. And he begins by saying Valama. So when the Torah tells us the material that the teva is made from, that it was added to the teva on the inside and outside, Rashi says, Valama, what's the reason? And he tells us the reason. And so too in other places, Rashi says, Valama, why was this command given? And he explains. If so, the question is over here, what's the reason for the tzayhar? And if it's for sending out the raven, he could have sent it through the door. And therefore, because of this difficulty that's here, Rashi explains that it's a window. Since Noach wouldn't make a window on his own, he needed a command to make a window because he would specifically not make it on his own. Because he was probably told all the details of the punishment of the mabul, including that lo shimshu mazalis, that the mazalis wouldn't function, so he wouldn't make a window. However, in actuality, Rashi tells us, Hashem made the rains come down with mercy. Im yachzru yu gishmei bracha, so that if the people did tshuva, they would be gishmei bracha, rains of blessing. And therefore, Noach was commanded to make a window. So what it seems like is being said over here is that according to the explanation that it's a window, we could understand why Noach would need a special command, because if not for the command, he specifically would not make a window. He would specifically not make a window because he was told all the details of the punishment, including lo shimshu mazalis, so he wouldn't make it. And so therefore he needed a special command to make the window. That's why he needed to get that command, because otherwise he specifically would not do it. Whereas according to the explanation that it's an Even Teva, we're there, according to the explanation, we have to understand the reason for the command. Why did Hashem give Noach this command? From Yenushal Torah in this Rashi, the difference between the light that comes in through a window and the light that comes from a precious stone is, the light from a window is a light that comes from the outside, and the light of a precious stone comes from within the stone itself. And these two ideas of a light that comes from the outside and a light that comes from within the thing itself are two ways in Avodas Hashem. The purpose of the Avodah of Torah mitzvahs is to make a tzayar lateva, which means to bring in and to reveal the Eir Eliki in this world. And this can be accomplished in two ways. The first way is to make a window, because in truth there is Eir Eliki in the world. Like it's known that the Bali Asakim, those who are busy with business, are able to see Hashgacha Pratis in their worldly matters, and even more so than those who are always found in the Dalet Amos of Torah and Tefillah. And it's just that in order to reach this, one must remove the Helam Vehester, the concealment, the coverings that cover over the Eir Eliki. A person has to remove the garment, the levush of Teva, of nature, which conceals the Eir Eliki, which is above nature. And this is the first level in Avodas Hashem, to make a window in the covering and the partition of nature, so that the Eir Eliki, which is above nature, is able to shine in the world. And after a window is already made in the covering and partition of nature, and so the Eir Eliki, which is above nature, is able to shine in the world. So this gives the person the strength, the kayach, to rise up and reach a higher level in Avodas Hashem. And that's what Rashi says, V'yesh Eimim. Who are the Yesh Eimim? Those who already made the window. They say Evan Tova Mir. Those who already did the first level, then they say you could go even higher to the next level. Meaning that not only do they remove the Helim and Hester of nature, of Teva, so that the Ehrlich could shine in, but rather they transform the nature that it itself becomes an entity of Eir V'Gilui, that the Evan itself becomes an Evan that is an Evan Toiva. It itself is an Evan Toiva, a precious, a good stone, Hameir Lahem, that provides light, that from the in nature itself it's transformed so that it itself is Ehrlich.